In the tapestry of history, there are threads that weave nations together, and there are threads that unravel alliances. Today, we delve into the fascinating story of China and the Soviet Union, draped in the same dual colors, emblematic of seemingly shared ideals. Yet, beneath the surface, a profound split emerged, and the warmth of camaraderie turned into the frost of animosity. Join us on this journey as we unravel how an unequal alliance, differing views, and an escalation of border conflicts led to a bitter split of the former comrade in arms. The Sino-Soviet Treaty of Friendship, signed on February 14, 1950, was intended to solidify an alliance between China and the USSR, but beneath the surface lurked an unequal partnership. Secret protocols acknowledged Soviet dominance in Outer Mongolia, granted Soviet rights of passage across Chinese territory during war, and restricted third-party economic rights in Chinese regions. With these concessions, Chairman Mao Zedong of China finally convinced Stalin to agree to a Sino-Soviet alliance treaty in December of 1949, with Stalin declaring "to hell with Yalta," effectively announcing the discontinuation of Soviet influence over the Manchuria region, as stipulated in the Yalta Conference post-World War II. The Sino-Soviet Treaty of Friendship would later become a treaty of contention, as China felt humiliated by Stalin's condescension and refusal to treat China as an equal partner. When signing, Mao reflected on his release of Outer Mongolia to Soviet influence, labeling it as semi-colonial. In January 1950, Stalin persuaded Mao to fight the Americans in Korea. The war would drag on for 2.5 years, from 1951 to 1953, inflicting heavy casualties and destruction on both sides. China suffered casualties ranging from 150 to 200,000, shedding blood for the Soviets. Despite Stalin's promises, Stalin would give minimal military assistance to China, leaving them to fend for themselves in the wake of US-led UN forces. The blood-soaked battlefields of the Korean War became a turning point. China's sacrifices, coupled with a sense of betrayal from their Soviet allies due to a lack of intervention and material support, fueled the flames of discontent, paving the way for the more negative sentiment directed towards them in the coming future. During the 1950s and 60s, Mao Zedong and the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev found themselves at odds over fundamental principles, particularly in the realm of foreign policy and global perspectives. Khrushchev's 1956 declaration of peaceful coexistence as a guiding principle clashed with Mao's aggressive policies of confrontation against the West. During a visit to Moscow in the midst of 1957 celebrations of the Russian Revolution, Mao publicly disputed Khrushchev's thesis, dismissing concerns about the dangers of nuclear war, stating that the worst came to the worst and half of mankind died, the other half would remain while imperialism would be razed to the ground and the whole world would become socialist. In 1958, the Soviets requested to build Soviet Navy bases in China for their nuclear Second Strike submarine fleet. Mao rejected this proposal, and when Khrushchev personally flew to Beijing to negotiate, he was openly called a coward by Mao. Nearly 4 years later, on September 24, 1962, Mao would state that, beginning in the second half of 1958, Khrushchev thought of sealing off the China coast, and he wanted to blockade us by forming a joint fleet in our country to control the coast. Mao's confrontational foreign policy against the West then escalated the Taiwan crisis of 1958, and when Khrushchev visited Beijing and warned that those who ignite it will be the first to be consumed by its fire in the context of mankind's new war, nuclear war, his attempt to ease the tension between Taiwan and China resulted in China accusing him of corroborating the United States' plot to create two Chinas. In response, the Soviets tore up the agreement on new technology for national defense on June 29, 1959, which included their nuclear aid program to China. During the 90th anniversary of Lenin, 1960, Mao would accuse Khrushchev of revising, emasculating, and betraying Leninism and selling out the cause of world revolution. This was mainly motivated by Khrushchev's de-Stalinization policies, which directly threatened Mao's personal philosophy. In response, Soviet leadership delivered a counterattack with a secret letter on June 12, indicting CCP policies and views. This letter, distributed at the Bucharest Conference to communist leaders worldwide, likened Mao to Stalin and denounced them as madmen, intending to unleash a nuclear war. The Soviets would swiftly withdraw over 1,000 advisors and technicians from China in August 1960, taking critical blueprints with them. Following the Bucharest Conference, rumors circulated that the Soviet Union intended to exclude the CCP from the communist bloc, potentially leading to the cutoff of economic assistance and Soviet military protection. In fear of future exclusion and isolation within the bloc, Mao began attempts to challenge Soviet dominance in communist diplomacy and establish China as a leading force within the communist world. Mao seized Poland's road to socialism in 1956 as a chance to exert influence and sent a delegation to Moscow, led by Liu Shaoqi, blaming the Polish crisis on big power chauvinism in Moscow. Mao proposed that the Soviet leadership subscribe to Bandung's conference's principles of peaceful coexistence among Warsaw Pact countries. This move aimed to teach the Soviets a lesson and positioned the CCP as a mediator, bringing China to the forefront of the communist world. In 1969, an undeclared military conflict unfolded between China and the Soviet Union, bringing two communist giants perilously close to war. Stemming from Mao's challenges to the historical border treaties signed during the Qing period in 1964, asserting that Tsarist Russia had unjustly taken vast territories from China and Siberia and the Far East, armies were mobilized and extra troops were stationed along the borders. Clashes of non-lethal nature between patrols and civilians were common, to the point where a special military unit of elite martial arts practitioners from Chinese universities was deployed to win fights against Soviet troops for morale. On March 2, 1969, a small platoon of armed Chinese soldiers stormed Zhenbao Island on the Wusili River, leading to the largest conflict during the border dispute period, involving infantry, armor, and air power. Zhenbao Island would be the first of many other fatal clashes on the Sino-Soviet border. This was further exacerbated by the deployment of smaller-yield nuclear weapons on the side of the Soviets and fears of US intervention on the side of China, potentially leading to a global conflict. In a diplomatic meeting on September 11th between Soviet President Kosygin and Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai, Premier Zhou emphasized the consequences of continued aggression, warning, should a handful of war maniacs dare to raid China's strategic sites in defiance of world combination, that will be war. That will be aggression. And the 700 million Chinese people will rise up in resistance and use revolutionary war to eliminate the war of aggression. In this time frame, the animosity towards the Soviets among the Chinese populace reached unprecedented levels. Let's hear firsthand from a Chinese citizen who lived through those unique times and experienced the impact of the conflict on a personal level, my father.
在我20多岁年轻的时候，我接受的是中国的传统的正规教育。这个教育告诉我，苏联是我们的敌人。从历史上看，苏联是在历史上侵占中国领土最多的国家。在近代，苏联尤其是斯大林之后的苏联共产党背叛了中国的友谊，欺骗了中国人民的感情，所以他们是我们最大的敌人。
After nearly 20 years of cold tension, the Sino-Soviet split formally ended on May 16, 1989, when Deng Xiaoping and Gorbachev met. While Deng declared the normalization of relations, expressing a desire for a new future, Gorbachev proposed a radical military détente and the withdrawal of Soviet troops from Mongolia. Both leaders agreed on economic liberalization within the Marxist-Leninist principles and discussed how the policy of economic reform could be enacted without political reforms. Little did they know that the echoes of that discussion would soon reverberate throughout Tiananmen Square.